Hello, my name is Evan Schwartz, and this is Milestone 4 of BattleCry. This week we started and created our working combat system. We are allowing players to both end and exit their turn. We've built an entire scheduling pipeline. The implementation this week is to expire lagging players' turns and flip the turn to the other player. That'll be the same pipeline that we do all of our maintenance through, so we'll go over that when we switch to the code review. We've got the start of the buff and the hero shop, so you can pull up your heroes and recruit them and level them up, and you can get your buffs and purchase them and hold them. But next week I believe we're going to be implementing where you can use those, assign those to garrisons for protection and leverage them in the combat when you're attacking. We had a bug in the map generation, just some backlog items. So water was being generated around the edge, so we cleared that up. That'll be fixed in all new map generations. We did some cleanup on the UI for icons, and I created a helper method to quickly jump from sector to sector and go to. So we'll take a look at those items, and we'll go ahead and go into the Android side. So once again, we're going to just briefly go over it through the Android so you can see all the parts and pieces, and then we'll dig into them a little deeper in the iPhone piece. So I'm going to log in as Evan first and go through his little turn, and then ultimately I'll end his turn and then go in as the Xander account. So let's take a look at that. So that's his account here. So this is the game I've been working with. And you'll notice as it loaded, it went right to the castle. So that's part of the go-to. So if I just tap the sectors, it automatically tries its best to center those sectors, and it makes it a little bit easier. Other big cleanup item is we've dramatically improved the scrolling, so it's less likely to accidentally select a sector. It's more deliberate now when I want to pick a sector or not pick a sector. There's a little color option here that right now I'm having the ability to attack this. If after I'm done attacking, that black highlighting turns to gray, that's the primary indicator that that sector is out of status. Its status is it's done something, it's done its combat. That's all sort of enforcing the rules. If I pick that, and I go from here, that's water. Make sure I pick the right one. That's source, destination. I can reinforce, and if I pick source, destination, I can attack. If I try to pick way outside there, it deselects everything. And again, that's all just reinforcing the rules. So one of them is if I select my own sector to my own sector, there is no attack button. I can't attack my own sector. Right? It shouldn't allow you to do that. And if I go outside the neighboring hex piece, it just treats that as a source selection, and then that becomes a target selection. I've got my attack button. And I can pick over there. It maintains my source. This becomes my new target, and I can attack just to make it sort of a natural combat system. We've got, this is our buff shop, and I put 4 items in there right now. I got currently 3 flaming arrows, and they're about 5 resources a piece. I've got 119 resources, and I'm generating 37 resources around. I can buy a flying mount. I can go over here to my heroes. Right now I don't even have an elf hero. I need to recruit it. Yes. That cost me 5. It's level 1. Do I want to go to level 2? Yes. And so on. And it increases as I up level my heroes. So next week we'll see an opportunity to actually implement and use heroes and apply buffs to garrisons and apply buffs to combat. So we'll take a quick stab at combat. So I'm going to pick this as the source. That's my destination. I got my attack icons, so I'm going to say attack. We're going to have some more. This is basically expansion room for icons to be able to apply heroes and buffs and things of that nature. But right now the only one is the BattleCry icon. So for the Horde, go ahead and attack that. For the Horde. Okay. Well, got some good cavalry. No archers. That's pretty bad. But I think I can still win this. So it's going to beat that down. Yeah, my cavalry blew him out. And at that point, I took that territory from Xander, so I now own that territory. It's worth 1 point. So I'm invading his area at this point. All right, so let's switch to the iPhone. I'm going to go ahead and end this turn. Are you sure you want to save it in your turn? Yes. And just to show you icon, are you sure you want to save and exit without ending your turn? No. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes. And end that turn. All right. So I'm going to get rid of that, and we're going to head over here and boot it up on the iPhone. All right, I'm going to go ahead and log in as Xander. This is sort of how I've been going back and forth between the Android and the iPhone to play my turns. And looking for my game. There it is. So I'm going to go ahead and log into that. And you'll notice that as Xander, the top portion's green and the lower portion is red. So this is the sector I just lost from playing on the Android side of it. And you'll notice over here down by the buff icon, there's space for one more icon. So I did a little polling with my test group. And because one of the big things I had originally visioned was as I come into this game, there would be a play-by-play of it sort of animating, which was really the big impetus between this go-to feature. So I could easily navigate around the map and then, you know, play the battle cry if they attacked your stuff and show you what the other player did. Well, believe it or not, that didn't resonate well with the players. They just wanted to get in, do their turns. If they are interested in listening to the other players' battle cry or whatever, one of their suggestions was clicking on that particular hex and annotating it. I'm not looking for the players to design the game. I think that there's got to be a middle ground. So that piece has sort of gone back into backlog. I don't want to force the players to have to watch because, as you can imagine, as I'm getting here, I have a lot of combat options as the game gets on, which is something I like, right? I like the fact that in the beginning it goes very, very quickly because I don't have a lot of things I can do. But as I take on more and more territory, I can attack more and more around the edges of my empire and expand it. So there's a lot there. I could see their hesitance in having to sit there and watch through it. So maybe an optional kind of catch-up tutorial is a way to go, with maybe even an option to go in there and click it again and see how many times does that hex flip back and forth. Maybe both options are the way to go. Still working out that piece, but under the hood, all the transactions for each one of these combats are being stored. So let's go ahead and do it. I'm going to attack from that down. So across this center here, right now all I have is the BattleCry icon, but you can imagine where I'm going to have the ability for you to assign a hero, assign a buff, and the garrisons will already have buffs assigned to them. That'll be part of the reinforce action that we get into next week. Roar! Roar! Ooh, nice. All right, so I can fight that. Knocked him out in one move. Awesome. All right, so essentially I was, and again, the neutral territories are meant to be easily taken. So the real fun is when you start getting into neighboring territories. It doesn't look like Evan. Ooh, there's a big one. Let's see if I can take that one. So target, get my attack button. Roar! Roar! These are very manly battle cries. Oh, that was awful. Okay, I'm not winning this. Yeah, I'm done. All right, so I did not take it. Now, right now, you'll notice that when I pick on them, that one's gray, but I pick on that one's got black highlight. That's just sort of a reinforcement to me that I've used that hex. So I picked this one as a source, right? That's my first selection. Then here's my second selection. I have the option reinforce. If I pick this one first, it's telling me sector is already attacked. You may reinforce or buff only. So if I try to attack another one, it doesn't even allow, it just takes the buttons away. It's sort of enforcing the rules that I can't really do anything from here, but I can do stuff to here. So we might need to do a little bit of visual enhancement there to make it a little bit more obvious on which direction we're going. I believe that I got a feedback from my advisor on maybe doing an arrow thing there. So right now I'm kind of just leaving that hung out there as cleanup. But this is just the way for me to know right now how I'm doing that. and getting that taken care of. All right, so battle pieces, I can't really own an unknown sector. I can't attack to it, and it won't allow me to attack from a sector I've already attacked. So this is sort of enforcing the rules. So this one I haven't used yet, and I can attack this unknown territory, or I can go over here and reinforce this territory, and so on. We've already looked at our buffs. We've already looked at our heroes. We've got our map. And water you can't do anything with. So this is going to be essentially our general combat system. We're able to take land. We're able to record the transactions in the BattleCry, so that's under the hood. We'll figure out what to do with that in a future milestone. And we're collecting resources. I collected 40 this round. I have 53, so I spent a lot last round. Let me see if I can go ahead and buff that guy up and buff that guy up. And give me... see, I got 23, I can give me another wall. All right, so now I'm just down to 3. If I try to buy another one, it says you don't have enough resources. So at that point, that's really all I've got for Milestone 4. And we'll take a look at the code and see how the new piping for scheduling maintenance works. All right, thank you. Hello, my name is Evan Schwartz, and this is Milestone4 code review. And we're going to start in Azure and show you essentially the scheduling service and how that works out. We've got our scheduling called daily maintenance, so we'll click into that. And in Azure, you don't have SQL Server agent. You don't really have the standard utility you would have if you had a local installed SQL Server. So this is just their way of doing it. So we've set up a BattleCry maintenance task that I run currently once a day at 5 in the morning is how the schedule is set up. And this is, we've had 10 successes. The last one ran at 6 a.m. That's probably because of the hour change, so that's interesting. So this is the URL itself. So the way that this works is it's a scheduler built in to call into my middle tier RESTful service layer. And I created a controller called maintenance or maint, and then I can pass in specific filter criteria. In this case, it's player. And then we'll look under the hood at the controller of how that works. But essentially this just functions essentially so I can look at the history. It calls that, and you'll see since the second it's been running. If I look at the second, you'll see here on my first couple runs I had an exception that I created at the core level, but today it ran pretty well, no problems. And it's been, that was during testing, so it's been running pretty solid since I put it into place. For this particular one, when it passes in player, I'm using the same architecture I'm using for everything. It's sort of a pass-through, passing criteria. Criteria goes down to a store procedure. Store procedure takes care of what it is I need to do with the data layer, passes up data in a very specific format, unbeknownst to the middle tier what the schema at the database is. It doesn't know anything about the schema. And middle tier takes that, sends that as a serialized object up to the client. The client deserializes and uses those objects. So the client doesn't really know anything about the data, and it only knows what objects are sent to it from the middle tier. The middle tier doesn't know anything about the data. It only knows what data sets have been set from the data layer. So that sort of keeps everything kind of decoupled from everything else. But essentially this is the Azure scheduling service, and it just calls a RESTful API. And this is sort of a static path of saying, hey, run the maintenance, run the maintenance, run the maintenance. All right, so then to take a look at that in the editor, so this is my maintenance controller here for my BattleCry controllers, maintenance, and essentially I'm passing in what is the task, what's the maintenance task you want. In the case of that URL you just saw, the maintenance task was player. So the whole point of this controller is it's just going to take whatever that task is, call the SP daily maintenance store procedure, pass in that is maintenance task, and the store procedure will sort out what it's supposed to do. So it's very high speed, low drag, just to be compatible with the Azure framework, to allow me to really set up a whole number of schedules and just passing the task name into it, and then the store procedure will take it. from there. So let's take a look at the store procedure. I think I have a latest and greatest SQL script. And what do we call it? All right, so this is the store procedure. This is our daily maintenance store procedure. And again, this looks shockingly similar to all of the other store procedures. It has a single prototype, one parameter named filter data of type XML. It has all of my header stuff, typical use stuff, and right now I'm working off of a single parameter, which is my maintenance task. So I pull a maintenance task from my filter data, and the example that is already set in Azure, it's player. If for some reason the XML data comes in and it's wrong or garbled or what have you, just default to none, and then I can react appropriately. But in this case, it passed player. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm inserting into the BattleCries a new BattleCry for anyone who's last updated the game, right, 3 days ago. So I'm looking for games who's been stagnant for 3 days. That means whoever that current player is, right, has not taken their turn. So I'm going to insert into the BattleCries. This is my transaction, right? So this is my my BattleCry with no BattleCry, so to speak. So that's what the null is all about. And it's putting in there that action lost turn. So that way I can record that player lost their turn due to this maintenance item. And again, whenever we get around to how the update and stuff works, whether it's a replay or I click a hex and it shows me a transactional list of all the things that happened, or maybe it's both of those things. I haven't quite worked that out yet. Then you'll be able to see these transactions where it says, "Hey, I'm sorry, you lost your turn." And then essentially it updates the battles, and it's swapping basically challenger to aggressor, aggressor to challenger based on that criteria. And it's also setting the updated. So it's updating the date to today, swapping the player, so whoever was stagnant to give the other guy a chance to play, and then telling him, okay, I updated the game today, so now I'm on another 3-day count. So essentially, this process is going to allow me to not only just do stagnant players, but games that's been sitting there for X number of days. You know, I can have a filter called games, right? Instead of player, it says games, and then I do all of my stuff here to clear out dead games that haven't been updated, that aren't complete in a certain amount of time. And even older complete games, you know, I can pull them out of the list after maybe a year or something like that. So anyway, this sort of is all of the piping for scheduled maintenance, and I don't have to write anything else from a middle tier perspective. I just pass another filter task item to the end of that URL. It gets piped down into here. So I just have the store procedure of what it is I need to do with the data, and then set that up as a schedule in Azure. So that's essentially the piping which associates the task. Expiration of lagging player's turn, issue 2926. So we saw the combat system, so we'll take a look at that. That's issue 2924, and that's all under my game controller. So under the game controller, the first thing we do is we record the challenge. So I'm going to switch down here, record challenge. So in the record challenge, that's where I'm popping up my message handler that says, hey, show the message. For some reason it's pulling in that, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. I don't know why it's giving me all this red. Let me do this real quick. It doesn't like it when I mix solutions. I'm not entirely sure why that is, so we'll just reload it. It's easier. Give it a second to load. All right, I don't want that update right now. There we go. All right, so we're back at so we start with the record challenge, and that's where that message pops up telling you to record a BattleCry. We've got a backlog item where it's going to do countdowns, and that'll affect everywhere when I get a chance to do that. And after that, it does a start coroutine of begin recording. So I'm going to go to that declaration. And this is very much what we've already seen. We're recording a 3-second recording at 8,000 samples. We're going to wait our 3 seconds, close our microphone, and then we're going to process our recording. And when we process a recording, we've seen basically this code before. We're taking our data, splitting it into 3 stacks of 8,000 bytes of infantry. We're doing our little equation, our FFT mapping against all of these. And once we get our results back, we're grabbing averages against those results. And then we just do our basically normalization formulas. All this is just leveling to get generally a decent answer. And then that generates how many infantry, cavalry, and archers we get. This is a little cheat protector. So after I've done my BattleCry, I want to make sure that I'm not trying to swipe the game away if I do bad and that sort of thing. So it automatically sets my source and target to done. So if you're playing it, you'll notice that the second you do your BattleCry, it automatically turns those to gray, and all that gets saved up. So we update the map, we save the barbarian, and then we generate your BattleCries and we update the game. So that the game, and this is where the transactional data comes in. So at this point, the action is attack. You notice on the other one, action was lost turn, and I'm storing some additional metadata items as to what the X and Y is. It may be interesting, depending on how this piece plays out, from a live replay or clicking on a hex and showing you in sequence the transactions as they've occurred to that hex. It may be interesting to have more metadata here, such as what was the outcome. Well, I know the outcome because I know who did this, but how many units did they summon? How many cavalry, how many infantry, how many archers, that sort of thing. So this will get fleshed out depending on which way ultimately I end up going with that. And then at that point, that instantiates the game, and sort of, you'll notice when we were looking at on the screen, there was everything staged and set up. The BattleCry has been issued, you're done, and you now have a fight button that you need to do. If you were astute during that first demo from the tablet itself, you'll notice, hey, I'm on the BattleCry screen. I didn't see a way to get off the BattleCry screen. My original write-up, kind of, once you're in that combat death roll, is you couldn't get out of it until you've gone through combat. Again, I'm getting some feedback from some of the players that they thought that if you haven't done the BattleCry yet, you should be able to back out. I'm kind of in agreement with them. So as a backlog item, I'm going to give them an exit button on that screen that's visible at the same time the BattleCry is. But once you've issued your BattleCry, you're kind of committed to the combat. You got to go all the way through. So that went into backlog as I was sort of polling some folks around me, pulling people in left and right. Hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that, type of thing? So anyway, at this point, they'll hit the fight button. Fight button goes to do combat. So we'll go back up here. It's always a brain torque flipping between Windows and the Mac OS as their scrolly mouse is in opposite directions. Okay, so once again, this is just a reinforce of saving everything once the BattleCry has been done, and then it goes through, and this is just wiring up all of the screen so that you can see all the stuff, right? So you can see what did my BattleCry generate, what are all the values, and that sort of thing. And then at that point, it goes into a while loop. As long as there's defenders and attackers, it'll continue through this loop. So this is doing all of the get hits, so based on the 213, 132 versus infantry, cavalry, and archers, detecting whether or not they did hits based on how many of each unit they have. So if I have 10 here, it's going to roll 3 or 10 six-sided dice to see if you got 3 or less. And if you did, that's going to be counted as a hit, and then it starts to deduct those hits. Deducting hits, this basically is what's generating those X's. I already have his backlog. I'm going to have to touch that up. But unfortunately, due to work, my my opportunities this week were very, very slim. I was on constricted timelines. So I just needed to get the functionality in place where we could start to conquer, because Milestone 5 really needs all that in place. And whether the X is pretty or not wasn't critical to me this week. So deduct the hits, create all the little X's on fly, deduct them from the visible strings, the text objects. I wait about 3 seconds, and then we increment the round. We update the text to show you, hey, you're on round 1, round 2, and so on. And then it's rinse and repeat until either the defenders or the attackers go to 0. If it has attackers equals 0, then the defenders won. So this is that there's a rule in there that says, hey, if mutual annihilation, I don't really care at this point whether the defenders are at 0. If the attackers at 0, it's going to stay the defenders hex, and the defenders will put zeros in here if that's all that's left. Otherwise, the assumption here is that I have attackers left. I wouldn't be here unless all the defenders were gone. So this is essentially swapping ownership of that hex. I'm now sort of deselecting my source and target controls to make sure that they are done. They can't attack again. So again, this is all setting up the rules. Is if my source can attack and my target is active, so they're both active hexes, I want them both to be done hexes. I can still reinforce a done target, but I can't attack from or do anything from a done target. So that's just sort of baked into the rules of the game. When all is said and done, I update and do a final save of the outcome of the battle, and then I abort the attack, which essentially just turns off all the screen stuff, taking you back to the main panel, and then I take you to your last selected hex and set that up, which is the source hex. The source hex is the X that's stored, not the target X. So that's basically combat in a nutshell. It's managing all of the rules. Let me get down here to the V's. Valid hex logic. So this is my valid hex logic. So first I need to know, are you on an even hex XYs or odd X hexwise? Because of the way the hex goes up and down, you'll be looking at them ever so slightly. But I need the targeting hex to be around your hex. You can't target water, and the source status, which is S, right? This right here, needs to be active, right? And this is essentially the same logic, except for rather than a plus Y, a minus Y, right? Plus, minus, and then again, that's because of the way the hexes zigzag across the map. Whether you're on an odd or an even one, you essentially, the hexes around you are a little bit different. So this is what is enforcing all of my source and target rules for clicking on the screen. You saw allowing the player to end and exit the game, so we'll switch up here. Let's take a look. A, B, C, D, E. I'll get the alphabet here in a minute. So here's my exit game. So in this case, I'm updating the map and saving the barbarian, and then asking the question, do you want to continue? This is these little helper dialogues. I'm passing in Unity actions into it. Save game on exit, close message dialogue, just to continue on. And end turn yes. So essentially this is where the meat of it happens. Go to declaration. And I'm just doing an update of the AI. And if I were to quickly go back to intern, and this is intern yes, go to declaration. So here I'm doing the extra work of, putting the barbarian back in collect mode, draining the map, draining the barbarian. I'm creating a transaction to say I've ended my turn, and I'm flipping the games from A to C, C to A, so to speak, and then I'm updating the game at that point with a battle call backup in turn. So this event fires, and essentially I load back to the main screen. All right, starting the buff shop. We'll take a look at that. That's easier to see in Unity. Where did Unity go? There you are. So in our canvas area, this is our hero shop. This is shockingly similar to all of our other lists. We're creating a bit of a standard. So here's our hero item. that is tracking all that functional stuff. So let's turn on the hero shop so you can see it. And let's turn on the hero item so you can see that. So in this case, what you're looking at is this is the functioning button, and it gets wired up on the data item. So very much as we've seen before, we've got a load. Which one are we looking at here? Heroes? Yeah. So let's look at our load heroes. Under our load heroes, we come through, fill our heroes, we clear out the list for each hero in the barbarian heroes. So every person that, for each game that started for both players, they're given a full list of heroes at level 0. That just means that you've got that hero, but it's not recruited yet, right? And so that's the list that it drives from rather than peeking back down to the database. It comes down to how dynamic these things are ultimately going to get. There's ways that I can make them super dynamic, but in this case, this looked like the best approach. So then I create my hero data item, and I'm setting all my pop-up stuff, who the holder is, all of my control, current player, my API, my game controller. Audio source is just something I carry around in case I need to play something out. This will be key as we get to the point where I'm layering out sound and stuff. And what is the hero's type? What is the hero's level? What is the hero's description? This renders the items. This takes all of the hero objects data items and pushes it to the view level. And then I set up the action on the do action, which would be in the set hero. And this is the render item you just saw, where it's basically loading and setting visibility on certain things. And the do action is this. So if the hero level is 0, that's why we get a different message. Do you want to recruit versus do you want to level up? And we've just got a message, yes, no, I didn't pass Unity actions here. It only has one possible outcome for this thing. So if we go over here to our show message, this is where it wires up the message box, and then you can see that it's passing Unity action by hero or close message dialog. This is just, I put this in place as a helper method in case I need to pop up with an OK message, which you saw if you try to overdraw your resources, it pops up and says you can't do it. Okay, great, and it just closes. So then essentially there's the by hero, it closes the message dialog. I'm getting what resources versus price. I'm figuring out what this hero is. This is a helper method to basically grab this hero. And if it's not null, make sure, as I'm adding or taking away, I just need to safeguard against that. Grab what its current level is. Make sure that it's not already 10th level or higher. That's one of the rules of the game, is heroes can't exceed 10 levels. Make sure that price is less than resources, and then buy the hero, save the barbarian, save the game, and add the hero back to the barbarian's list. Otherwise, you have insufficient resources, maximum level to any hero is 10, so it's just giving you the rules as you go through it. So that's heroes. Setting buffs. Where is that? Set buff data on. There we go. Shockingly similar. You've got all of your wire up, show messages. Instead of by hero, you've got by buff. Is it this buff? Right. So it goes through much the same process here. I'm closing my dialog. I'm getting my resources and price. I'm finding the buff in my hero list of buff inventory, make sure it's not null, make sure I can afford it. In this case, I'm incrementing quantity rather than bumping up a level. Save it, and I either have insufficient resources. I have no upper quantity limit. If you want to buy 1,000 of them, you can. And it has the render item, so that these list data items pretty much serve themselves up. So that's the ability for the buff in Hero Shop. Map generation, that is under the API handler. And create board, add water, go to declaration. So you'll notice that we're now going, and it was changed from 1 to 9. It's now 2 to 8. So on this is the inclusive number, and this is exclusive. So it's really anywhere from 2 to 7. Okay. So that's what I changed it from, to make sure that water doesn't appear on the edge. I've got another kind of backloggy item that I'm going to have to sit down and beat to death. As I'm going through a lot of these map generations, I'm noticing that on occasion, a whole bunch of mountains are up at the top of the mountain, or they're down at the bottom because of the way that I've got it to cluster. So what I'm considering on doing is, rather than this cluster just one cluster of mountains is have two clusters of mountains, a cluster above the midpoint and a cluster below the midpoint. Same thing with forests and the same thing with swamps. So that's just a to-do item for me to come back to kind of make the map a little bit more balanced, because it would definitely be unfair if all the mountains and forests were above and all the guy at the bottom got was swamps and plains. Resources would be a real challenge for that. So that's a to-do backlog item I've got to work on. So anyway, that's talking about issue 2919, fixing the map generation, setting the icons left justified, back into Unity. That's these guys, and so in the text you'll see they're all left justified, and they're pretty much all the same way. Boom, boom. And this, I did this to myself last time. Let me go ahead and unmark this. Left it open, ended up having to chase it down. There we go. So that was taken care of, and creating the helper go-to. Let's go back to code on that. That's on the hex logic. Or my swipe logic. I think that's my swipe logic. Yeah, so here's my little go-to, and essentially what this is doing is, whether or not I want to go to it and select it, or go to it and not select it. Make sure that I've got a game controller. Game controller is going to get the current hex right to this XY, so grab me that hex. Set it selector. This is the little mathematics to figure out how to scroll that way. And then I've got my start time, my set marker time. So this is basically lerping, right? And mark journey, and then I set my go-to to true if my journey is over that. And then in my updater, if do go to, I'm figuring out my distances, I'm figuring out what fraction of the journey I'm on. Then I try to lerp there. And otherwise, if for any reason there's an exception or the object's not set yet, or insert reason here, I set do go to false. And once I've reached greater than or equal to basically 100, I've reached my location, I turn do go to off, which stops this piece of code. So essentially that's kind of how I built the go to. The real magic was this mathematics and figuring out where it is. Hang on just a second. Okay. Just wanted to confirm my mic shuts off in 30 minutes. All right, so this is the magic here with the formula that figures out how far to move the map so that it centers that hex. Other than that, I believe those are the final pieces of Milestone 4 from a coding standpoint. We're moving right along. Milestone 5 has got quite a bit to it. So this week, good news is I'm back in town this week, so we should be able to address some backlog items and get quite a bit of the Milestone 5 done, and maybe even some stuff that I had some low-hanging fruit out there. Thank you for taking the time to watch Milestone 4 BattleCry. Thank you.